Warsaw in the summer of 1942 was a city collapsing under hunger and fear. The ghetto was bursting, its streets choked with carts and the smell of refuse, its walls closing tighter with each passing week. Disease crept through alleys, German soldiers stalked the main roads, and the clatter of boots meant terror. Children wandered barefoot and skeletal, their cries drowned out by the rumble of trains. Yet inside one orphanage on Krokmalna Street, there remained a trace of order, a thin line of dignity in a place that seemed to have forgotten both. Its director, Janusz Korczak, had built a fragile island in the middle of the storm, and when the storm broke, he would not leave his children behind. Korczak had been famous in Poland long before the war. Born Henryk Goldsmith, he became known as Janusz Korczak when he began writing stories and articles. He was a physician, a soldier in the First World War, and above all, a champion of children. He wrote books such as King Mat I, a fairy tale about a child who becomes king and tries to rule with justice. He hosted a radio program where his voice comforted thousands of listeners with practical advice about raising children. And in his Warsaw orphanage, he gave young boys and girls something unheard of at the time, a voice. They had their own parliament, their own newspaper, even their own court, where they learned responsibility and fairness. He believed a child was not an incomplete adult, but a person already deserving of respect. When the Germans invaded Poland in 1939, Korczak could have fled. Friends urged him to leave. Publishers promised to help. He stayed. When the orphanage was forced into the Warsaw Ghetto in 1940, he went with it. The building was cramped, dark, and constantly short of food. Korczak begged on the streets, sold personal belongings, and bartered with strangers just to bring bread back for his children. He refused to let them become beggars. Instead, he kept their routines alive. Morning prayers, school lessons, chores, games in the courtyard when possible. At night, he told them stories by candlelight, spinning tales of kings and heroes even as bombs rattled the windows. He often went hungry so that they could eat. By the summer of 1942, the Germans had begun the gross action, the massive deportation of Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto to Treblinka extermination camp. Day after day, trucks and trains swallowed thousands. The orphanage children heard the shouts in the streets and saw their neighbors vanish. Fear hung over every doorway. On August 5th, the German soldiers came for Korczak's orphanage. Orders were blunt. The children were to be deported immediately. Friends begged him to save himself. He had admirers even among some Germans who offered him protection. He could have walked free, papers in hand. But every offer was turned down. He told them simply, "How could I leave the children now?" To Korczak, the answer was impossible. He had walked with them through every hardship. He would not abandon them at the end. That morning, he dressed the children in their best. White shirts and blue skirts and trousers, as clean as possible in the ghetto's filth. Staff members carried the institution's banners to keep order. Witnesses remembered how calm it seemed. Nearly 200 children formed rows, their teachers alongside them. At the front walked Korczak, holding two of the youngest by the hand. His longtime assistant, Stefania Wilczynska, marched just behind. Onlookers pressed against walls and windows, some weeping openly. They saw not chaos, but a procession, solemn, dignified, unbearably quiet. The column made its way to the Umschlagplatz, the assembly point for deportations. Survivors later said Korczak told the children they were going on a trip to the countryside, that they would see fields and breathe fresh air. Perhaps he wanted them to be less afraid. Some clutched small toys, others carried satchels with the few possessions they had left. The Germans, unsettled by the discipline of the march, allowed them to pass without the usual whips and rifle butts. One witness described it as the saddest parade in Warsaw. At the Umschlagplatz, The children and their caretakers were herded into cattle cars. The doors clanged shut, bolts slid into place, and the train rolled toward Treblinka. From there were no records, no list of who cried or who was silent, no detail of how Korczak comforted the frightened in their final minutes. But those who knew him believe he held their hands, told them stories, and stood among them until the very end. At Treblinka, the children of the orphanage were led directly to the gas chambers. None survived. Janusz Korczak was 64 years old. He could have lived. Instead, he chose to die with the children he loved. His execution was not by firing squad or rope, but by the same machinery that murdered millions, the gas and smoke of Treblinka. His refusal to leave them has become one of the defining moral acts of the Holocaust. After the war, his story spread across Poland and beyond. Survivors of the Warsaw Ghetto told and retold the tale of that final march. To them, it symbolized courage in the face of annihilation. In Warsaw, the orphanage was rebuilt as a memorial. In Israel, statues were raised, including a bronze at Yad Vashem showing Korczak with children gathered around him. His writings continued to inspire. Teachers read his words, parents quoted his advice, and activists for children's rights pointed to him as proof that dignity must be defended at all costs. The scale of the Holocaust was so vast that it often blurs into numbers: 6 million dead, thousands of ghettos, hundreds of camps. But Korczak's march personalizes it. It shows us faces, rows of children in clean shirts, small hands clutching toys, a white-bearded man walking at the front, refusing to step aside. It forces us to imagine what courage looks like when every choice is despair. For Poland, Korczak became a symbol of national loss and defiance. For Jews around the world, he became a martyr of compassion. His legacy is carried not only in memorials, but in the way people speak of children's rights today. He was among the first to insist that children are not property, not half-finished adults, but full human beings with voices that deserve to be heard. That belief cost him his life. Even now, more than 80 years later, the image remains. A march through the ruined streets of Warsaw, children in their best clothes, staff holding banners, neighbors watching in silence, a train pulling away, its iron wheels carrying innocence into oblivion, and one man, Janusz Korczak, who had every chance to live, stepping aboard with them. In a century defined by war and cruelty, his final act shines with a rare clarity. He once wrote, "Children are not the people of tomorrow, but people today." On August 5, 1942, he lived that truth, and he died with it, surrounded by the children who had trusted him until the last. Thank you for listening to Last Post History. Subscribe for more true stories from the world at war.